Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creative Confessions, where we talk about all things Artist Alley, manufacturing products as an artist, and small business advice. I'm your host, Macy, and I'm the artist and designer behind Mualcaina, a small business focused on kawaii designs. When you first think of Artist Alley, you might think of the artists behind the tables, but sometimes there are people who may be involved, such as helpers and proxies, that can make artists' lives a little easier. I'm excited to welcome our guest who has been vending all across the country as a helper and proxy for many artists, on top of vending as an artist herself. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Shamima, better known as Moonpooart. Yay!
Hello. Wow, that was a great intro.
Thank you! So I'd love to start out if you could share a little bit about yourself and how you started Moonpooart.
Once again, I'm Shamima, and I've always had an art background. I studied traditional art at UCI as an art major and also with a digital art minor. So I learned how to stretch canvases and also how to do Photoshop and stuff like that. Kind of was into like being a jack of all trades during that time. But then after graduation, it was a bit difficult finding like an art-centered job. So I was like, I need to make money. So I ended up finding my way into working at an engineering firm, but I still did art on the side. Not long after, like, it was 2019, so then COVID happened, and then lockdown happened, and then, like, I found more time to actually do work and draw, and then I would post on TikTok, and then people were like, oh, you should sell this, and I was like, you know what, I have the time now, I might as well just try this. So Moonpooart started as, like, a small little shop on Etsy, and then now I started doing conventions, and like that expanded pretty far, and now it's like it was a full-time job for me for the past 2 years.
Oh, that's crazy. So now, do you currently do art like full time, or is it like part time or a hobby?
I did do art full-time, and I do consider even right now doing it full-time, but like 2 months ago I started working at also like my alma mater. I started working at UCI again.
Oh, wow.
And kind of, yeah, so I'm kind of like balancing between the two. I do like a 40-hour work week, but also probably spend like 30 hours on my art in general. So it's a bit more than a full-time job or a part-time job.
Have you noticed, I guess now that you have a full-time job on top of doing art, eventually, I think you mentioned that you eventually want to make art your full-time, or do you prefer having it split where, oh, you have your own corporate job, but then also doing art on the side?
I think having it split is ideal for me right now because I like the financial stability a lot, and then also living in California, that's like a major concern. Like everything is so expensive, and like I would like my art to be enough to help like fund my lifestyle, but then I'm also a very treat yourself kind of girly, so it's like it's definitely not funding that right now. So my full-time job is helping that. I also like to create a lot of things, so the full-time job is helping fund more projects that I wasn't able to do before.
No, that's fair, because even though right now this is my full-time, I wouldn't be opposed to going back to corporate if I really had to, or if I even, let's say, I got tired of Molcana or I wanted to do something different. I wouldn't be opposed to going back to corporate just because, like you mentioned, the stability is there, or knowing that you have consistent income coming in versus doing cons. It's kind of hard because you don't know if you'll get into a convention. And even right now for me, I didn't get into Anime Central or Fanime, and those were two of one of my best cons after Anime Expo. So it was a little bit concerning, like, oh, I didn't get in. But luckily, I do have some like online income, but then that's also not guaranteed like next year or even like in a few months from now. And having a corporate job kind of helps provide that stability, even with like insurance and like 401ks and all of that.
Exactly. Like I feel like doing art like as I've been doing, it's kind of like a young person's game. Like it's going to be hard for me to sustain that lifestyle if I'm like in my 50s and 60s and stuff like that. I feel like with the full-time job, a bit of like an issue is finding motivation to do art after like a full work day. But if you really love what you're doing, it's not hard to bring it out of yourself to like start drawing and be like, oh, I'm gonna just doodle, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, definitely. I feel like I've talked about this with like other friends. They're not in Artist Alley, but they're also very creative. I mean, I don't know if your current full-time role is like more on the creative end, but I feel like if your job is, I wouldn't say like opposite, but not super related to like art, I feel like it could be potentially a little bit easier, not necessarily easy, but a little bit easier to also put in that effort into art because you're not using all of your like creative juice or creative energy into your job and then also trying to pull some out for art.
I think like one of my friends told me something and it really did help me like with the because it's like a fairly new transition and I'm still getting used to it. After like a work day, a lot of people are like super tired, like I don't want to cook, I don't want to do chores, and like even then like I don't want to do my second job of art. But like so it's like, oh, you're going to come home and spend like 3 hours scrolling on your phone, and in the end of the night, you're still going to be tired. So like I was like thinking it's like, yeah, you're right. So like I might as well be tired and do art and it rather than like be tired and then just scroll on my phone or like just sit around, laze around. Like at least at the end of the day I'll be productive.
I love that thought. I actually never even thought about it that way, and I really like that type of perspective because yeah, like obviously you've done conventions and like you're exhausted or even just art and everything in general. So you might as well be tired and exhausted doing something that you really enjoy doing rather than rotting like
Exactly.
scrolling on socials. So like with Moonpooart art, I'm assuming you're doing everything yourself with like drawing and fulfillment and like social media.
Yeah, I have been doing it all by myself, but like there was like a summer when I had like younger cousins be like, I need to do my college applications. Can I put your business down? I'm like, okay, sure. Film TikToks for me and like do like really cute photos. So I was like, all right, then you could just like write me down as like a reference. But for the most part, yeah, I've done everything for myself.
On the topic of Artist Alley, when did you first start doing conventions?
I did conventions at the end of 2021. So like end of COVID, quote unquote. I think it was a great time to start because it was like as soon as like lockdowns ended, cons are coming back, the drought is over, everyone's going to conventions. The first con I did was like a special edition SDCC or San Diego Comic-Con. Like San Diego Comic-Con is like the 4-day con that happens in the summer. This was like in November and I believe it was like the week before or like the weekend before Black Friday weekend. So, like, people were gunning to spend money. So, like, having that be, like, my first experience at a con was, like, pretty amazing. And, like, I got to see people and, like, see how, like, the workings of, like, a seller is. And it was very exciting.
Did SDCC happen, like, that summer? Or did they just, like, move it?
I know. I don't think SDCC happened that summer. I think it was just, like, the special edition intro. Like, it was, like, they didn't have their, like... Because if I remember correctly, SDCC has a lot of artists that are grandfathered in. So it's a very kind of, like, it's kind of hard for new artists to get into it. But Special Edition gave opportunity to people who haven't vended at SDCC before. It didn't, like, cause a leeway for them to get into SDCC later for the next year in the summer. But it was kind of like, oh, a little small thing that they were doing. They planned it to be small, but it definitely wasn't small. There was, like, a lot of people.
Oh dang, that's a really good first con experience.
Yeah, they didn't do that special edition again. I was hoping that they would, but nah, it was just that one time.
Well, since then, how many cons have you done since you first started?
I did count out all my con badges, so like I did 32 cons, but like I've helped out at a couple, so possibly I've attended like more than 40 cons to work at. It's kind of nice to keep them all and like see through them and be like, oh yeah, I remember this one.
Yeah, I've been meaning to have like some kind of hanger on my wall just to be able to display all the badges, but it's still in my closet, but one of these days.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes certain cons have like ugly badges, so I don't really want to display it.
Or they're like very thin, and I'm like, you want me to preserve this how?
Or like it's just like a piece of paper like stuck to a lanyard, and it's like,
So as of last year, how many cons did you do?
I typically try to do 2 cons a month, and then like during like summer and fall, it might have been like 3 cons a month. So a bit more than half, probably like 16, 17 cons.
And out of all of those 16 conventions, like which one would you say was your most successful?
For myself, I did actually Sakura Con last year. And it was actually the first con where I got to get in under my own brand name. So I was very nervous about that one. I cried to a friend. I was like, I probably won't make a single sale. Like I paid for this Airbnb. I paid for these flights. It's not going to happen. And then my friend was like, you're going to make 3 times the profit. And I'm like, this guy's lying to me. I'm not going to be friends with him. But then no, it turned out to be like quite true, and I told my friends like, you know what, maybe you manifested it for me. I'm gonna treat you to a good meal after this con.
Yeah, I heard a lot of good things about Sakura-con. Like, I've always wanted to vend there. I think it's just like timing's always bad. But so on the topic of like proxies and helping, from my understanding, before vending as an artist in Artist Alley, you also used to work as a helper or a proxy for other artists. Can you briefly explain the difference between a helper and a proxy?
A helper and a proxy, I feel like it's all up to personal interpretation to start with, but and like the titles can be used interchangeably. For me, being a helper is when you're working at the table with the artist and you're selling their merch alongside them. You're trying to help promote their brand and like dealing with like customers and stuff. Usually it's not as demanding as being a proxy. Typically the artist takes the lead for most of the sales, and also the customers are here to see the artist and like admire their art and chat with them. You're just like kind of like helping out with like transactions, making sure like the crowd control is good, the flow of sales, all that kind of stuff. And like if the artist needs a break, or if they need like a water break or a bathroom break, or like to get food, you go on those like runs for them. Typically it's a lot more casual. Like even like if it's like a slow period, the artist usually lets you like, oh hey, go ahead, like look around the con yourself, like if you want to get some shopping done. So it's very chill, I would say. I think for a proxy, it's more serious. It's a contract. You're being professionally hired to do this job. Typically for that, you have to deal with inventory and like getting to places on time, like understanding the con hours. And also being a proxy deals with a lot of trust with the artist and yourself as a proxy. What else? I think for a proxy, you have a lot more responsibility. So for one thing is like knowing what time to get to the convention and like working all the hours. Also how to set up the booth and like what equipment to use, understanding their point of sale system, trying your best to be able to make profit for the artist, because if the artist is doing this full time, it's like their livelihood and you can't really skimp out on them because they're trusting you to do a good job.
I know you've done it like several times. Even like that's also how we met, because I think you were helping out June at the time. It was like at LA Comic Con. So how did that come about for you as being a proxy and a helper?
Well, I kind of just stumbled into it. Well, for actually Ji-yoon like, and Hanju were like the first artist friends I ever made like online through like TikTok. Like I'm really grateful to Hanju because she like bought like my Jujutsu Kaisen prints and she posted them, and then like I got like a bunch of people following me. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But like we became good friends, like doing like art trades and stuff like that. But like to get into the proxy work, it actually was during COVID and I was lonely and I wanted to like hang out with people but also couldn't hang out. So I would go on Discord and like try to reconnect with like old people I knew from college. And also this was like the hype of Among Us and like Animal Crossing. So like getting people together and playing games was a lot more easier back then. Like there was like a huge Discord group amongst like mutual friends and like friends of other friends where everyone would play Among Us like weekly. For my past, I was always the art kid in the group no matter what, and I didn't know that many art people back then. So like one of the nights, some girl on the Discord, like we were just chatting and I was like telling her like, oh, I like drew today, and she's like, oh, like can I see what you drew? And honestly, this was like a very humbling moment for me because I was like, I'm the art kid. I'm doing pretty good. And then I show her my art and she's like, wow, it's cute. And then she's like, I draw too. And she shows me her art and I'm like, holy shit, this thing's amazing. And it turns out like she's a pretty big artist in the scene, like with the anime and like all the video game stuff. And it was Helen and her brand is Toaster Kiwi. And I was like, I'm kind of embarrassed for showing her what I drew. Like it was like the most wimpiest work in progress ever. But she was really nice, and like we were just chatting about art, and like I saw her online shop, and like for like a full year of playing games, and like I'd buy things from her shop, she'd send me like extra gifts and merch and stuff like that. So one of the years she was like, because she knew I was from California and she got into SDCC special edition, so she's like, oh, you want to come help me? And I was like, yeah, I like this girl, I've never met her before, but like let's hang out in person. And through her, I started doing conventions because she showed me like how to work it and all that kind of stuff. And she introduced me to like the two artists that she was staying with at that time. And those two artists are like Think New and Akanite, and we became like really great friends. I'm gonna be really honest with you. The reason why I wanted to start this whole art journey was because at the end of the con at night in the hotel room, they all counted their cash from the weekend. And it was, I've never seen that much cash before. It was like a drug deal kind of like situation where everyone laid out bills of like all their money. And I was like, I want this. I want to be able to count like this or count cash like this. They were like measure how like fat the stacks were against each other. It was like, this is like a dick measuring contest, but this is amazing.
So I think you did mention a little bit of like how working as a proxy would work. But can you lead me through like the process from like beginning to end, like how they send you inventory during con weekend and like how you send inventory and cash back to artists at the end?
Each artist is different of how they like to run things for their business. So, cuz like living in California, we have like the blessing of having so many cons here. So, two of the artists that I work for, they prefer sending me like a ton of their merch to my house. And I'm also like really lucky that my roommates are super understanding and gave me like a big corner of the garage to host like all these artist stuff. Like, I don't know if you've seen my stories sometimes where like I do like a garage like pan, and it's like I could honestly hold a convention at my house because that's how many like so many different artists have sent boxes of their merch. But typically if I'm proxying for them and I'm going to a con, I do inventory and I replenish the stock, and I go to a con and then like I come back, I replenish the stock for in case I have another con like a couple weeks after. Whenever they come to the California for a convention themselves, they know that they don't have to really bring too many things. And also, if they're like international, it's easier just shipping it to my house than like crossing the border with it, because it's also like causes issues and stuff, and they don't want to be shady. So typically, these two artists like to have their stock with me, and that includes like their whole setup and all their equipment and stuff. And they're also pretty nice about like letting me use like certain panels and stuff if I need it for my own tables, or if I need like display like I don't know some hangers or something like that. They're like, I'll just grab it from my stock. So it's like mutually beneficial. Another artist, like you helped me with the process of this. It was Jiyun when I proxied for her. She had like 3 cons in a row in California, or like I think the first one was like a night market, which she came, she like did it, and then she left her merch with you, and you handed it off to me. Then I worked Anime Pasadena for her. And then, like, the week later, I think it was AX Chibi that she came back for, and she just grabbed the bags from me and then did the show herself and then flew back with her own merch. It was really helpful because she didn't have to spend 3 weeks in a row in California, being as expensive as it is. And I think, like, the third way for me to get, like, items is, like, if I'm traveling to a convention and the artist wants to ship the merch to that convention, whether it's, like, a local FedEx or a UPS or even, like, to the hotel I'm staying at, I just grab the merch, set up equipment and everything, I do the show for them, and then either I take it back with me or I just ship it back to them. But that's like easier on me as a proxy, but it's also one of the more riskier options in case like things get lost or don't arrive on time. Typically, I tend to like keep track of how much like for electronic payments, the artist could see it from their side of things with like the system and stuff like that. With cash, I typically keep it with me, and at the end of the convention, I send receipts of like things I should be reimbursed for, whether it's like, oh, like I had to take an Uber, or like I had to pay for the payment for check-in luggage and like or like shipment fees and stuff like that. So once we have all the receipts, everything down, and we're like established like this is how much I'm owed, I could typically take it out of the cash bag and like just Venmo them or Zelle them whatever the difference is, and like vice versa if they owe me a bit more. For international artists, it's a bit more difficult because they don't have like Venmo or Zelle. They have like a different e-payment system. So I just deposit it to my bank, and we have like an open tab, and when I see them again in person, I just hand over the cash to them.
Because yeah, when I was talking to Gary, I was like, how does that work? Because I've never had a proxy not like in California. It was just like 626, so it was like local. But I was like interested like how, like obviously you can't just mail like cash or it's like do you write a check, but it's interesting knowing that yeah, like Venmo is an option, so you can just do it in that way. So during con weekend, how much communication would artists typically expect from you as a proxy? Like do they expect like daily updates, or do you have to like cash count per day, or like do you just wait until the end of the weekend?
I typically try not to like do too much communication with the artist, because I feel like most of the people I've worked for, they were very much the type like, here's the stuff I gave you, this is where you have to go, do it yourself. I'm like, I'm having you do this so I don't have to do this kind of like vibe. So I typically do like communicate with them like 2 or 3 times a day. Like in the morning, I take like booth pics and like really cute like videos and stuff, like things that are like social media presentable. It's like, here, post them, like tell people where I'm at, that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the day, I do give them a cash count just so they could gauge how like sales were and like how the audience was in terms of the show, because like that's always like a deciding factor whether they want to come back to that show or not. Like I know the artists talk about their own artist friends, and so they could kind of gauge if like you're not doing well as a proxy, if like their own friends are doing better than them, and it's like, oh, you should be doing more. Like, so it kind of helps them understand how like the show is going.
We've talked about this once on how artists kind of give you like an info sheet for proxying at a con. Can you explain like what info is usually on it.
An info sheet is like the greatest gift an artist could give their proxy. The more detailed it is, the better, and then that will cause less problems and like less need for like communicating with the artist like throughout the show. For my info sheet, it's always helpful when the artist tells me like what apps I will need to download before the show. So like if it's like a POS system like Shopify or Square or like Pay Now or something like that. Oh, like this convention you might need to take a couple Ubers and Lyfts, like here download this too. They would also say like what else you would need to bring with you, like bring a fanny pack, a portable charger, your ID, your like proof of vaccination, how much like float money or change you would need to keep with you. You could have your contract be part of your info sheet, like how much the proxy is going to be paid for the weekend, whether it's going to be an hourly wage or like per commission. And if it's commission, like clearly state your commission goals. These are just like arbitrary numbers, but for example, if it's like a 10K sales weekend and like your proxy made like 12% commission, you would owe them like $1,200 rather than if they were paid hourly, they wouldn't be making as much if it was like a good sales weekend as an artist. Like having that as an option is pretty nice. It also gives the expectation to the artist or the proxy to like work hard and be like, you know what, I want to hit the sales goal and like I could get this much money if I work really hard. So it's kind of like a nice incentive to have. Inventory is important, and like seeing if you want to pay them for like inventory hours or even setup and breakdown hours, like having that stated would be ideal. Some artists have like really quick setups. Like it's like, oh, throw stickers on a table and you're done. Whereas like other artists have like, oh, you gotta build a tower of posters around you and like make your fortress. Having like established like what your expectations are and like in terms of like wages is very important. Also, the convention info itself, like where is the convention being held, what are setup hours, what are attendee hours, where is badge pickup, or like if there's like a docking area where to go and like bring your merch with you, if there's like a QR code for registration or something like that, like having that tacked onto your info sheet would be important. Also, if you're flying out of state for cons, like the flight confirmation and itinerary, just so your proxy knows where they have to go, what time they gotta get there, because certain artists are like working different hours or like they're in different time zones. It's like, please, I have to catch this flight in 30 minutes. I don't know what our confirmation code is. Also, going back to like booth setup would be important, like having pictures of your booth, as many as you can, like show them exactly like how you want your booth to be looking. If there's little notes and details like, hey, zip tie these, like tricks and stuff, like, hey, zip tie these areas, or like pre-tape these posters so like they don't fall off, like things that wouldn't be super obvious would be important to add to your info sheet. I don't know, maybe at the end, like talk about like the POS system, how it works, like if there's login information that they need and passwords. Typically, like what to do with the merchant display after the con as well. Also like if you're shipping, like which FedEx or like UPS to go to, like hotel info, check-in, check-out times. There's actually a lot on the info sheet. Like I'm just going down, but like there's a lot you need to do. But like the more detailed it is, the more helpful it is, to be honest.
I love how you're very, like, it was very detailed. And I feel like a lot of those things are some things that, like, as an artist, like, you don't typically think about just because you're so used to the routine of everything that you wouldn't consider, yeah, like, these specific, like, grid cubes need to be zip tied. But having basically a step-by-step of everything that you typically would have to consider on an info sheet would definitely be helpful for a proxy who might not be used to your like booth setup or like how you usually like process like things for flights. And I feel like for that, even if you don't have a proxy in the moment, it does help to list everything, like even on just the Notes app, just so if you do happen to have a proxy in the future, you already have something to reference, so you're not like pulling that out of your ass in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you work hard on your info sheet once, you could continue using that for like any future ones. And even for yourself, like I'd be like, oh shit, I forgot this. I should have known to bring this. But like that's for me as like when I'm doing my own stuff. But like when I'm doing a proxy, I have the list, and so like I check down the list and be like, I should make an info sheet for myself sometimes. But like it's a lot of work, but it's a very appreciated work.
Yeah, I have one for my booths just because my booth setup tends to change pretty much almost every con, just because I always have like new stuff or I took some stuff out and I have to reference something for like different setups, like 6 foot, 8 foot, 10 foot. They all have to be configured differently. So it helps having an info sheet so you're not like thinking during setup when you only have like an hour to set up. So as someone who has hired helpers in a proxy, personally, like I felt that a lot more trust is involved in hiring a proxy versus a helper. Since, as you mentioned, I am present with a helper, but like with a proxy, they're responsible for the money and inventory without my physical presence. Are there some certain characteristics that you feel that made you a good proxy, and what are some of the characteristics artists should look for when hiring a proxy?
Well, for me, since, like, as we mentioned, there's so much trust when it comes to proxying. Like, so far, I've only proxied for friends or, like, mutual, like, people I know through mutual friends. I feel like a good attribute to have is to be, like, social and friendly. Like, being an extrovert would help a lot as a proxy. I've seen certain people hire proxies where they're, like, not very engaging. Sometimes they have, like, their head down, or, like, they're kind of, like, hidden away. And it's like, yeah, that's not great, because, like, people are not going to come towards you if you're not very approachable. But at the same time, it's like there's so many different types of customers. Being extroverted is good, but also understanding how to read the body language of a customer, because sometimes being too much of an extrovert is daunting. And especially if the customer is, like, more on the quiet side, just, like, giving, like, a friendly smile should be enough to, like, entice them. But, like, don't be like, hey, how's it going, da da da, like, kind of scare them off and be like, oh, this person's way too much energy. And also, like, not being too forceful is really good. If you're, like, a proxy, if you're proxying, you're like, oh, I'm a salesman. But at the same time, don't be the type that's like, I'm going to poach these customers from my booth neighbors. Like, causing animosity between, like, vendors is not a great thing to do. Because I've seen people be like, if the booth neighbor is selling Genshin and, like, they're having a conversation, you just pop your head up, be like, hey, I sell Genshin too. Look at my stuff. Like, that's not really great. Like, even, like, if your artist isn't there and, like, you could get a sale that way, it doesn't provide, like, a really good image for your artist, because you are representing their brand in that moment, and you want to, like, not have it be like, oh, this person hires people that aren't very friendly, or, like, oh, this person's being an asshole, that kind of stuff. Like, you want to harbor good relationships with your customers and also with other artists as well. I think another important thing is to, like, know the merch that you're selling. Even if it's not, like, a fandom you're a part of, just, like, having, like, surface level understanding of, like, certain characters, like, what they do, just so, like, when someone's coming up to you, you could talk to them about it and, like, be friendly, and, like, they'll remember that interaction. And also you'll understand, like, oh, this person likes Jujutsu Kaisen, they like Gojo, oh, they might like Nanami, like, I have Nanami merch here, and, like, just, like, kind of guide them into, like, things that you think that they'd be interested in.
And when you proxy, is it typically just yourself, or are you ever able to have, like, a helper that they can also hire?
If it's, like, a very busy con, typically the artist might hire, like, multiple proxies, and they're usually, like, friends that I already know from working with before. If it's a more slow con, I don't particularly think the artist would want to hire another person. It's like, this should be manageable by yourself. But they are pretty open, like, oh, if the table comes with, like, an extra badge, like, you can invite a friend to come, like, hang out with you and stuff like that.
That's fair. And usually, like, if there's an extra badge, it's assumed that you're the only one getting paid, right? Just because you're the main. Okay, got it. What's something that might surprise people about being a proxy that they won't typically know?
Well, being a proxy is very high demand. Like, everybody wants a really good proxy, and they're willing to pay, like, kind of, like, throw yourself out there, be like, who's gonna pay me the most, and I'll help them. So if you have, like, a good reputation as a proxy, people will want you. And I think it also comes with the territory of, like, proxying being not a super, like, it's not a very long career, because people who are good at proxying, either, like, A, they're like, I'm good enough to be able to do this by myself, like, I should just sell my own art. That's what I did. Or, like, B, it's like, oh, proxying is fun, but it's not as consistent, because it all depends on if the artist can book the show to start with, and if they need you. So it's, like, not consistent income. So it's like, oh, I could do, like, spend my time doing other things, or, like, getting a full-time job, which I also did. A good proxy doesn't last very long, to be honest. And they also oftentimes get poached by other artists, which is, like, it's pretty great as a proxy, because you get to learn a lot as you go. Like, every artist is different. There's different merch. For me, it was really helpful because I was selling my own art, but then I was able to see, like, certain things that sell better, and, like, how to price certain things, and, like, oh, this booth setup it's, like, ideal, like, I would want to do these, or, like, do this for my own table, like, oh, these are popular. It's like, oh, I should consider making something in that same vein too. You end up doing a lot of, like, on the field, like, market research as a proxy.
And I feel like you brought this up a little bit, but how are you usually compensated, like, as a proxy?
Typically I'm paid hourly, and that's, like, how I prefer it, because it's a lot of work. Like, we all know how much work it gets put into doing this business. I've been to so many cons. I feel like just being paid a meal or being paid like, oh, you get to attend the con like with a badge is not enough for me personally. Since I work for friends, sometimes certain friends and their art are at like they're at different levels in their career. So one artist can pay me like a 40-hour wage, like pretty well, like, oh, like I'll pay for your flight, your Airbnb, like any food that you want, you have a food budget, like it's like all the bells and whistles. But then there's like people that I work for that aren't at that financial like level, and it's like I don't want to be like, I don't want to work for you because you don't do as well or something like that. That's messed up. That's fucked up, you know? Like, I like this person. If it's a friend, I'm like pretty lenient. It's like, all right, just give me a flat rate. Like, you don't have to pay for like parking or gas. I'll just get there myself. Like, don't worry about it. Like, I'm more in the vein of like building relationships with the people I'm helping. I don't value monetary as much as I value relationships with the people I'm working for. So especially like if it's a friend, they're like, hey, like I'm busy this weekend, like something came up. I got into the show and I don't want to give up my table. Do you think you could do it? I'd be like, yeah, sure, no problem. Like, as long as they're like communicative about like what their expectation is and how much they could do for me, I'm like very open to be like, yeah, that sounds good with me. So, and also like, I think it helps because right now, proxying is not like my only source of income. It's not something I rely on the most anymore. So I'm like more willing to like help out friends here and there, even if it's not for like monetary reasons.
I mean, I don't know about prior to 2020, but I feel like now a lot of artists are getting to a point where they can't afford to, like you said, like the bells and whistles, paying for everything and then paying you like a really pretty penny for working at a convention. Like I'll talk about this in the next question, but sometimes I was like telling G and I'm like, maybe I should be a helper because like they can get paid, or like even a proxy because like they can get paid really well. But then also with varying degrees of how much you are into Artist Alley, yeah, not everyone can afford to pay all the bells and whistles, and maybe they can only pay you like just a flat rate, which again is fine, like you mentioned, since you are prioritizing like building that relationship. But like if you feel comfortable sharing, like what's the most you've ever been paid as like a helper or a proxy?
This was probably the only time this was ever gonna happen. I don't see this like ever happening again. I actually got poached for Anime Expo by my friend. He paid me $4,000 for a 4-day weekend. And I was like, because
yeah.
like,
I was like, can I work
amazing,
for
like,
him?
Exactly. Like, it was definitely like me, because like I did promise to work, like I had plans to work with Toaster Kiwi for her second brand. So I was like, oh, okay, because she hired like a couple people. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this for you. Like, it was already in the plans. My friend, he needed help. And he's like, can you work for me? And I was like, nah, I already committed. Like, I can't do this. And he's like, I'll pay you $2,000. And I'm like, no, I can't. And he's like, I'll pay you $2,500. And then, like, I was like, no, like, I have my pride. I have my word. I can't do this. I can't. Then up until the point where he's like, I'll pay you $4,000. And I'm like, let me see what I could do. So then I did like know that one of my friends, he lives in NorCal and he really wanted to go to AX, but like badges were sold out. And I was like, this kid really wants to go. And like, he's helped Helen before during one of like, I think it was Fanime, where like he lives up there. So he's like, oh, I'll come. And it's like, hey, let me show you. So he's kind of familiar with her booth and how it works and stuff like that. I went to Helen. I was like, hey, I got offered $4,000. Like, and she's like, you know what? This is like really great on her part, because she looked at me. She's like, you know what? It's understandable. If you want to leave, like, I totally get it. And so I was going to be like, oh, like, let me ask if my buddy can come down. Like, his name is Emery, so I'll just say names so it's easier to, like, map it out. But I was like, oh, I want to ask if Emery could drive down from NorCal that night. It's, like, the night before AX. It's, like, if he wants to, like, work for you. I texted him, and he's like, yeah, I want to come. So he, like, made the overnight drive, worked AX, and I was like, as long as I had, like, someone to replace me, and I wasn't leaving Helen hanging, then I would have been like, it worked out for me. Because if he couldn't make it, then I would have just been like, $4,000 sounds good, but no. Because I do have like my pride.
It's like, I value my friendship
like,
too.
Yeah, exactly. So like, it didn't leave her hanging. I got to help my friend out, and it was a lot of fun. And this is like one of the moments where it's like, yeah, if you're a good proxy, people will want you, no matter what the price is.
That's also why it's good to have a lot of connections and relationships.
Exactly.
And I feel like you've brought this up, but are there certain things that you think should be expected as compensation as a proxy, besides money, given that you are selling for someone else in their stead and it's more effort than being a helper?
I don't know if this answers the question, maybe, but I do believe that if you're a helper for an artist before you become a proxy. I think it helps if the artist helps introduce you to other artists and helps you build relationships within the artist alley like community. Sometimes when you're off by yourself, it's like intimidating and also gets kind of lonely. Like after the con ends and you're like in a new state, you're like, oh, you're just in this hotel room by yourself. Like it's nice if like it's people that you were introduced to before, be like, hey, let's all grab dinner together. We kind of know you. Like if your artist helps you build more relationships, I think there's a lot of value in that. And like also like you could see people checking in on you. It's like, hey, like I know my friend like has this proxy. Like I know we've done it during I mean, sorry, you weren't there, but during Kawaii Con, because Kat, like Mima Puffs had a proxy, and every once in a while we'd come in and we'd check up on him and be like, hey, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Like, do you need anything? Do you need new stamp cards? Like, stuff like that. Like, even like having somebody to like just chat with, like, not a customer service space, but just like friendliness, it's helpful.
I never thought about it that way. I actually really like that because, I mean, me personally, I think if I didn't have artist alley, like I got lucky with making artist alley friends because I'm very shy, especially when it comes to new people, which is why I feel like I want to be more like you. You're very like extroverted and like very quick to like introduce yourself, which I'm trying to be more like that. But I
think
do
you're doing
like
a great job, Macy.
Thank you. I do like that you, I guess, like, even with, like, if you do have, like, a helper, or introducing them to some of, like, your artist friends, so then, in the future, if they do proxy for you, it's not very lonely, because it can get lonely if you don't have, like, artist alley friends.
Like, even, like, you introduced me to your helper, Jody, and, like, I chat with Jody every once in a while. Like, she reacts to my stories, so, like, it's built, like, a really good friendship between, like, proxies or, like, helpers and stuff, so it's nice.
So for those who want to become a proxy or a helper, but don't know any artists personally, like in your case, what would you recommend they do if they want to go into that?
It's a bit hard for me to answer that like accurately because I've always worked through like word of mouth and people introducing me to other people. But I'd say maybe hit up like an Artist Alley Discord and be like, hey, I'm really interested in this. I want to start helping. Like, I want to go to these cons and stuff. And like, I'd like to be on this side of like the con experience of being a seller and an exhibitor. Like, I would like to help out. And it might not even start out as like you're gonna get paid for it. It might be like, here, we'll like let you have like a free badge, or like, here, we'll treat you to like one meal or like a pretty nice dinner or something. It would help get you out there, and then you could show that you're a good worker, and then maybe the artist or whoever you're working for will hire you again for like a later show, because then they're like, oh, you're already kind of pre-trained, and then through that you could build your network and like get word of mouth out there. Because I've seen like on the Artist Alley Discord, there have been people be like, people who are looking for proxies in that certain state, and people are like, oh, I'm here, I'm happy to help. And sometimes you as an artist might need to take that gamble.
I'm lucky in that I do have friends who are willing to help me at cons, but if I didn't have that option, I would have to go to Artist Alley, like that Discord. Yeah, I've seen a few comments or a few posts where people are like advertising their services, or even on the same coin, a lot of artists do ask if there are some people available. And I feel like if you are interested, you kind of have to approach it like an unpaid internship, because again, not everyone can afford to pay their like proxies or helpers. Well, maybe not proxies. Like, I feel like you should get paid if you're starting out as a proxy and you don't know that person. But I feel like for helpers, you kind of do have to approach that in like an unpaid internship, because usually for bigger artists, like, you can disprove me on this, but I feel like if you're a bigger artist, typically you would be at a point where you do know a lot of people enough to have them as helpers. So I feel like it's a little bit harder to get to that point unless they advertise on social media that they do need a helper at their con. Like, I think like TLT Cup, I know she tends to hire a lot of people that she doesn't like know personally, but I feel like it's a good way to start if you just go to like smaller artists and then just like work your way up as you get that experience.
Yeah, I believe that's the same too. I don't see any other way of how you'd go about it, to be honest.
So going into conventions outside of like proxy and help, but as an artist, how do you decide if a con is worth vending at again if the revenue isn't necessarily like amazing?
Because I did watch your video with Ivy and Jiyoon, and they also like talked about it, where it's like you have like your or like the line you draw, whether it's like the profit was worth the effort of going to that con. I think for me, I'm kind of, as long as I didn't lose money, I'm happy to go back to the convention. I think there's more things to experience at every con. Like, it's always different. Crowd is different every year. Like, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You get to learn a lot when you're at certain cons. I feel like for me, honestly, the line is like, if I lose money, I probably won't go back. If it's a local con and something like I think like 3-4 hour drive at most, maybe, I'll definitely go to that con because like there's no reason not to do it. I know some people are it's like, oh, I'm an anime artist, I don't really want to do comic book conventions or like or vice versa. I feel like it's not a bad thing to try. Cons are already kind of hard to get into in general. And if you like build that box around yourself, be like, I'm not going to try other things because I'm not into that other thing, it limits you even further. Even if I didn't make as much as I would as an anime convention, I at least made like $200-$300 more. Like, it's just it was like a free weekend where I would have made nothing. But it's also like how much you value the effort that you're putting to traveling, setting up, all that kind of stuff. It's up to personal interpretation.
I'm like looking back into LA Comic Con because like I did decently well. I think at the time I was just so overworked because I had just come from vacation, and then for like 3-4 weeks straight I was like basically working every weekend or traveling every weekend. I mean, I'm not doing LA Comic Con this year, but now I'm like, was I just really exhausted, and that's why I don't want to do it? But sometimes it has me thinking like, was I just thinking that in the moment, or like was it true to like how my feelings would be consistently? But
there's like always external factors in like making your decision. Like I did LA Comic Con last year too. It's not the best. Like it's mainly because it's like the comic book crowd, and from like my understanding of how the comic book crowd is that typically it's more families. And for one thing, kids don't have like that much money to like blow on keychains and stickers and stuff like that. And typically it's like the people who do blow money would rather blow it on like more exclusive items or like signed books by like or signed comic books and stuff like that. So either if they're spending money, they're spending money on like big ticket items, not like a pin or a keychain. For my content, I don't do well at comic book conventions. Like when I did LACC last year, I didn't lose money. But then I wasn't like in line to be like, oh, I'm gonna like sign up again. You know, I'm like early registration, none of that. And I was like, oh, when I'll make my decision when like the application period opens again. And then it opened again, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do it. Like it's local enough. And then like a friend, she was like, hey, I'm getting a bigger table. You just want to split with me? And I'm like, all right, sure. Like I won't like lose as much money. So I'm like, sure, why not? So many external factors that end up deciding whether you want to go to a con or not.
Like it's very subjective, even though typically it's like, oh, did I make like a good amount of money? But then also like, how do you feel about that con? Because it's like you could be making good money, but then if the customer experience isn't that great, or even just the event experience, or the event organizers were kind of giving you a hard time, or they were disorganized, those are some things like definitely to consider.
Oh yeah. So I did Komori Con. Like I was helper / proxy. So the artist I worked for had 2 tables because she had 2 different brands. So I was helping one of the brands, and I felt like for that con specifically, I didn't have good interaction with the staff. The staff were very power trippy, and they were extremely aggressive. So like KomoriCon is like kind of like a decent mid con, and also like everyone loves going to Portland. There's no sales tax, so people are like balling out with their shopping there. Because like honestly, that interaction wasn't very good, and despite the sales being really nice, I was like, I don't think I ever want to vend for KomoriCon.
Dang, I did not know that. I didn't know about the sales tax thing or staff. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to start Artist Alley?
I have 2 pieces of advice. One is more sunshine and rainbows, and one's a bit more serious. I feel like the first advice is like, just try it. Because there's always going to be somebody that can appreciate what you make. Like, I've seen art from people, it's like, that's crazy. How do they make money? Like, I do not like this. But then, like, I'm tabling next to them, and I'm like, I have, like, the big head and be like, oh, I'm going to do so well this con. But then, like, I see them get customers. I'm like, wow, that's very surprising. But it's also very pleasant. Like, this is me kind of being, like, mean about it. In that vein, I learned that, like, no matter what you make, there's always going to be someone that will like it. Because, like, I'm very much the type is, like, I want my friends to succeed and be into this. So I have couple friends that aren't in the Artist Alley scene, but they'd like, oh, I want to make like, I tell them, like, just draw me something. It could be something super stupid. Just draw it to me. I'll make it a sticker. I'll sell it, and like if I make like $4 or $5, I'll just give it to you, you know? Like I've had fun. Somebody got something that they could enjoy, you know? For KawaiiCon, my friend got really into making crochet. So I was like, hey, make me like a couple items, like small items. I'll take it with me. If I sell, I'll sell. And then like you get profit and I get to enjoy the experience, you know? And like I came back with like a little like envelope of cash and be like, here you go. You sold out everything. And she's like, wow, this is amazing. I had a friend that's really into VTubers, so he made like a Gura sticker. I was like, oh, just give me a stack of the stickers. I'll sell for you. I sold one, but still, like, he was very happy with that one sale because it's like he wouldn't have sold anything. So it's like, yeah, just make something. No matter what it is, like, people, there will be somebody that will enjoy what you have to offer. I think my second advice is the artist alley scene and just doing art in general. Passion is important, but it's not the only thing that will help your business and like what you want to do. I strongly believe discipline is more important than passion. Just continuously making things and just like, even if you're not feeling it, just be like, just forcing yourself to do it, I think is more important, because then it builds a habit where it becomes like second nature to do it, rather than like waiting for like bursts of inspiration. Like, I don't know, I'm free this hour 3 days a week, I'm just gonna draw. Being disciplined is very important, I would say. Passion can take you only so far.
I love both points, actually, because, yeah, with the first one, like, we've been to so many artist alleys that we see, like, some of the wildest things, and people will buy it.
Bald Miku.
Yeah, that's literally what I was thinking. And it's a cute plushie. It's a really cute plushie. It's not something that I would personally buy, but it's really cute, and I know a lot of people like to buy it. And it's like, that's
I've seen that plushie at raves, like when like EDC and all that kind of stuff, and like Beyond Wonderland. Like, I've seen people like have it on their little totems, like Bald Miku, and I'm like, wow.
There's an audience for everything. And like, even with the second point with really requiring discipline, I don't think I would be where I am right now if I didn't have the discipline. Because, yeah, especially in the beginning, we're not all going to be lucky in that like one of our posts will go viral or like our art will sell out. Because I remember I think for the first year I couldn't really pay myself like anything. Like, all of the profit was literally just going into like inventory, so I wasn't making any money. And it wasn't until like the Eat a Bag Kickstarter that was it was actually like the first time I was able to pay myself, and even like pay myself for like the iPad that I bought. So like, definitely having that discipline in that, like, you really have to enjoy what you do. You have to still like go through with it, because it's not gonna be like sunshines and rainbows. I know we talk about money and like how much money we make, even though it's relatively vague, but like, you're not gonna make that much money like in the beginning. And I know a lot of people who want to get into Artist Alley or vend at cons because they want to make like all of that money. That money doesn't come very easily, and like, you won't get to that point until like later on, really. Moving on to speed round. So what's the most exhausting convention you vended at? And it could be as like a proxy or helper as an artist.
I would say it was probably Anime Impulse SD. It was their first year of doing that. It was a very slow con, and it was just me. And there wasn't that many people, there wasn't any sales, and it was just like sitting there for hours. And that seemed to be the case for everybody I was talking to. Maybe this year it got better, but the first year it started, it was very slow. And even then, I was like sitting. This year. Oh, then maybe it didn't do so good any year. Yeah, because I do like Anime Impulse. Like, I the one in Pomona was super fun. It also works out because it's local, it's close by, and also it happens during Lunar New Year. There's all the vendors and stuff, all the food vendors, everyone's coming by to that. So Anime Impulse itself does pretty well, but just like certain locations and timing wise, if they don't bring in a crowd, it gets really tough.
Yeah, no, I've noticed that a lot of the cons or events that are a lot slower are the ones that are more exhausting, because you try to figure out like how to spend that time. And even if you are drawing in the middle of it, it's still discouraging because you paid to be there. You could be drawing in the comfort of your own home, but instead you're either in the heat or like sitting on an uncomfortable chair. So I can see how that's very exhausting. What's your favorite convention or event that you've done, and why?
I mean, I've done quite a few fun ones. So I've done AX and Fanime, and like Hallmat is like the known party con. But like, surprisingly, my favorite con was Anime Week in Atlanta. Okay. And the only reason it was like my favorite con is because I would say I'm lucky. I have like different friend groups in the Artist Alley scene, and like sometimes I can't get together with everybody because after the con, and that's what you want to do because you haven't seen your friend in like a couple months and stuff like that. But then there's like the concern of like, oh, we're working on a weekend. Weekends are super busy. It's hardly any time you could find reservations at places. Wait times are super long. And you definitely can't bring a big crowd with you. Like probably like 3-4 people per dinner, and you try to map out your dinners. The reason why I loved AWA so much is because across the street from the convention was a round one. And we gathered like 20 or 25 artists from Artist Alley, and we all just walked across, got like the cheap round one food and just played arcade games like for like 3-4 hours, and it was like the best because I got to hang out with everybody at once. I didn't have to like plan too many things. People got to eat what they wanted. It's like burgers, hot dogs, you know, ice cream, that shit. But it was really fun. That honestly is one of my favorite cons, just because of like being so close to a round one.
It's definitely one of the main concerns, especially when you have like a big group of friends. It's really hard to find places that are open, or even when they are open, the wait is like over an hour and then you're already hungry. So it's like, do we wait? Or, and then it's sometimes, even if you are in a big group, you end up like splitting tables just because there's not a lot of space. So when it comes to Artist Alley, what do you invest in and what are you cheap about?
I definitely invest in my booth setup. Like, it's still like a learning progress for me, but like I try my best to make it as appealing to the consumer's eye. And also at the same time, since I travel with it, I have to be like, it has to be sturdy, but at the same time it has to be lightweight in case I'm flying with it somewhere. It's like I'd rather prioritize filling it the luggage is full of merch rather than display equipment, which I have to bring back. I can't really sell that. That definitely, like, making things look pretty, make it look cute. I would put money into that. It's quite important. Also, the merch itself. The thing I'm very cheap about is my own self-care during cons. Eat, like, fruits and vegetables? Nah, we're gonna eat 85-degree bread every single day.
Okay, the way I was thinking
like,
that.
I was like, for Anime Las Vegas, we went every night to 85 degrees and just restocked. And then it's like, oh, water, hydrate? It's like, no, I'm gonna have to pee all the time. I'd rather not. It's like, but I'm so tired, I definitely need coffee, which will make me dehydrate even more. I'm gonna tell you, after conventions, when I get home, my skin is like not doing so well. There was no skincare. There's breakouts from all the junk food and like sleeping late, waking up super early. So yeah, I'm cheap about what I do for myself during cons, to be honest.
I am like, not, I wouldn't say I'm strict, but I feel like diet-wise, I'm like relatively good on a non-con day. But then when it's con day, snack whenever you want, drink whatever you want, but maybe not during con because you might have to pee. There are no rules. And then I just reset that when I go home. What's your controversial Artist Alley opinion?
Okay, this is me not really enjoying, or like being, not, I would say enjoy. I was like, I'm not part of these fandoms, but I would say like there's a lot of either Honkai or Genshin or VTuber merch. Like a lot of it kind of looks the same to me. All the VTubers look super unique, but at the same time, everyone just makes the same thing again and again and again. You know what? Kudos to them because that shit sells. Like that's what the consumer wants. I could also be understanding is like we fly to cons like every other weekend kind of, or like we go to cons every other weekend, so we see this more often. Whereas like a consumer be like, hey, this is the one con that happens in my area for the whole entire year. I'm going to go to this. I'm going to spend all this money, all that kind of stuff. So for them, it's all new things. But for us, it's like all old stuff. So like I do like when certain conventions do like the whole thing is like set like 30% or 50% of your work needs to be original art. Because then I could like actually take a look of like how the vision that the artist has rather than like doing what's popular, you know? Like I'm more interested in what the artist enjoys themselves. And then like, oh, I could probably relate to them a bit more because like, oh, this is really cute, that kind of stuff.
I actually didn't even think about that because, yeah, now that I'm looking back into what I see in Artist Alley, I would say, like, yeah, there is a lot of the same thing just because, yeah, it sells. Like, literally, I'm very basic. Like, One Piece, Jujutsu Kaisen, Demon Slayer, like, everyone has that. But then also, now that you brought up having that percentage of original art definitely helps in making it a little bit more unique because I feel like once you do a lot of anime conventions you tend to see the same thing. I mean, I don't blame people for wanting to do like Genshin or VTubers just because I don't know about VTubers, but I know, yeah, like Genshin IP like allows for fan art, right?
Yeah.
Do VTubers also allow it or is it just like Genshin?
I'm not sure. I just know Hoyoverse is very open to like fan art.
Yeah, it's like if I was into those fandoms, I would definitely do that. I just feel like a poser if I did it, and I'm not. I don't know.
I agree.
So, what has been your best investment in your business, and why?
I would definitely say it's my iPad. My iPad is a glorified 1K sketchbook. Like, I don't use my iPad for anything besides drawing. Learning how to like use Procreate and Clip Studio, like for the longest time I've used like a cracked Photoshop on like a $30 Wacom tablet, and even then like if the tools aren't very nice, like sure you could do like art without like really fancy tools and stuff like that, but I'm gonna say it helps me for sure. It definitely made me want to draw more, and I would doodle anytime I was free I just take it with me, and it made me create more things in like spaces where I wouldn't want to, because like I had to, if I ever had to draw before, I had to be at home plugged into a computer, all that kind of stuff, whereas like with my iPad I could just take it anywhere and just draw. Like I go to a really nice coffee shop, and it's more motivating to me.
Yeah, just the convenience and accessibility of having a really good iPad to draw on. Yeah, because my iPad, I bought it in, I think it was like late 2020. And it's like 2024 now, and it's still like fantastic. And I didn't realize it's been 4 years. I'm probably going to try to run it to the ground because it's amazing. And there's so many gigabytes too. I would also add that my iPad is one of my best investments for sure.
Like I started out as a traditional artist. Like I would do oil paints, I do like watercolor. For me, I have a lot of interests and I like to delve into all of them. There was like a point where I would do custom like Nike shoes and stuff like that. So I had like boxes of that, like all the leather paints. It got to a point where I was overwhelmed by all the materials I had. Whereas like with an iPad, it was just like all condensed into one, and it wasn't like as messy. Because I know like if I was painting something, it'd be like a whole week's worth of mess. Like all these paints all laid out, all this paper, all these like cups of water, different like various colors. Shouldn't be keeping around with my boba, but never had that mistake. But just in case, it's a concern.
What has been your biggest money mistake with your business, and why?
I would say whenever I made self-indulgent merch. I feel like sometimes I like this. I want to make this. Let's manufacture this. Let's make 500 units of this because it's cheaper if I make more. This is early on. So like I didn't have the idea of like, can I sell 500 units of this? Like I'm making this for myself and I think it'll be cool, but that doesn't necessarily mean it'll sell. So like I end up having dead stock and it's like, guess it's blind bag time. It's coming to the conclusion is like, before I decide to make something like a large scale, I have to really think about like, can I sell like 500 of these? Can I sell 100 of these even? And it's like, if that's not the case, then maybe I'll just allocate that to something else, to another design that might do better.
It's very easy to get blinded by the very low unit price. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna increase it to like 200 units because it's so much cheaper unit price wise. Yeah, like you said, can you even sell 200 pieces? It helps to have like a sample, and that's also why I try to slow myself down by doing pre-orders, because it's so easy to be like, especially if let's say you just did a con or you did well during that quarter and it's like, oh, I have this money, I want to buy this many units, but it's like, yeah, but like, will people buy it? What is your biggest business insecurity?
I think for me, it's social media. I don't have a very big social media presence. It's due to my lack of discipline of like not wanting to record. Like I honestly don't like social media too much because maybe it's because I'm bad at it that I don't want to do it as often. Because then I see like how you and Jiyun and Hanju like always constantly recording, always like making content, and it's like, oh, I should take tips and tricks with that, where it's like, oh, sometimes like reuse like the same stuff and just like talk about it in like a new perspective, like because like some people haven't seen the first video, you know, whereas like me, it's like, okay, shot this, one and done, let's go move on to the next thing. So I'll spend like months drawing or like months working on something and be like, all right, time to record it. But then the crowd that I had before didn't like stick along for the whole entire ride of when I was working on that project. So I feel like social media is a bit of my insecurity, and I don't really know if I have the motivation to like work really, really hard at it. I should, but honestly, I'm like, it is what it is.
No, that's fair. I'm just glad that I personally enjoy working with social media because, yeah, I understand it's like a whole different thing and not everyone's going to enjoy it. I feel like for you, maybe like subconsciously you value like in-person interaction and like relationships more over like digital relationships. I wouldn't say that, obviously. I don't value like digital relationships more over in-person relationships. But I feel like for me, as someone who is like more towards introversion rather than extroversion, it's easier for me to cultivate relationships like digitally first, and then like maybe that relationship translates in person, like when I meet that person. Whereas for you, I feel like it's because it's easier for you to make relationships like in person, you prioritize that over like
no, yeah,
social media.
I actually didn't think about it like that, but like you stating it, that makes like a lot of sense. This is like me trying hard and then not receiving like a lot of interaction, or it's not even like likes. Like I like it when people comment, but it's like, no one's saying anything, maybe it's not that good, and it's like discouraging. Whereas like even like at conventions, even if you don't make the sale, if it's someone's like, wow, that's really nice, and they just walk away, even then it's like, oh, okay, cool, that was pretty sweet.
No, yeah, I feel like especially knowing you, I think it just makes more sense that I feel like that social value is like more so like in person rather than like online.
Yeah, but I do have to like pull up my bootstraps and do work on my social media a bit because like I talked to like Crystal and then like I see you guys with your like Kickstarters and like pre-orders and stuff like that. It's like that is like extremely helpful. Like it would cut down costs for me and like all the new projects that I want to work on by like a lot if I thought about it that way. But then like I'm also like I don't really have that many followers. Like, oh, would people even like want to be interested in this? Like, do I have that reach? And then it does discourage me from starting that. But then I'm like, you know what? You should just do it. That's it. Like, you know, sometimes just throw yourself into it and see what happens, because then even if it doesn't work out, I still have that experience to maybe go back to it later at a time when I'm like, oh, I'm more prepared for it.
To be fair with Kickstarter, because I guess if you also treat it like a marketplace, it does. I think when I did my first like Eat a Bag Kickstarter, like I did have like it was like around 7K at the time, and actually my social media grew because of that Eat a Bag Kickstarter, because it went like viral a little bit on TikTok and like Instagram sometimes. And even like with Kickstarter, like personally, I've pledged on a lot of like Kickstarter campaigns, even if I didn't know the artist, because I found them by looking up like Eat a Bags or enamel pins or anime pins. So I feel like it's worth trying regardless of follower count, just because Kickstarter also has that audience. Are you working on any big projects or new products that you'd like to share?
Right now, since with the extra job and the extra income, I am doing more fun projects, I would say. And there's still like more self-indulgent projects nonetheless. One of my like favorite characters in Sanrio is Hangyodon. It's like the blue fish that's like so ugly that it's cute. Like I heard like in Japan there's like a lot of merch. So like I'm excited for my Japan trip in like next year hopefully. In the States there's not enough Hangyodon merch. Like I'm tired of Kuromi and My Melody. I gathered up like a couple of artist friends that I know also like this character. So like I was like, oh, for Fanime, let's just make a sticker sheet together. Like I want to do more collaborative works with artists. I think it's a lot of fun, especially if it's like work that's like, oh, it's kind of like no stakes, don't throw like that much money into it or anything like that. So I was like, I'll pay for it all. I just want you all to just draw me one Hangyodon in your style. I'll make all the sheets and I'll sell them at Fanime, and if we make a good profit, I'll just divide it by how many artists participate. Just like it might not even be a lot of money, but I still think it'll be fun. Like I'll be like, oh, $12 here, $12 there, that kind of thing. But I think it'll be fun. Everyone seems very excited for it. Another one, honestly, this is the most stupidest thing I've ever done, but it gives me like such a laugh to do it. Well, it's because my name is Shamima. Me and my friends very, very like creatively came up with like a group name, which is called the Shamafia. And the way to be part of the Shamafia is if you go on a couple of food adventures with me. Like I live in OC, so like the food culture here is so good. We're so pampered here. So like I have my favorite spots. It's like just have a meal with me at one of my favorite places, and then you could be part of the Shamafia. That's the only prerequisite. Oh, I'm doing like it's so dumb, but I'm working so hard on making membership cards. So they're gonna be like really nice plastic cards that have like a really cool logo. Like on the back you'll be like, oh, like a coat of arms or some shit like that, where like I vow to like continue. So there'll be like expiration date, and I want to make like really cute like custom stickers where people could put in like place of their profile. Like I was thinking like, oh, maybe people could like draw themselves, but then like not everyone like wants to do the art part. So I was like, oh, I'll make like really cute stickers here and there and just like be like which one represents you, just tag it onto the corner, that kind of thing. I know like one of my friends, she loves Waluigi, so she's like, can you make like the dumbest Waluigi thing? I'm like, all right, I got you. Come on, Macy, join the Shamafia. Let's grab more food together. Yeah. I was gonna make like, I don't know, like 30 or 40 cards, just like be like, here's your membership card, and like it'll expire by this day. Like come grab another meal with me before it expires.
See, I love that because I feel like as an artist, and now that I've done this for a few years now, it's kind of hard to separate like what are some like art things that I want to do personally that has nothing to do with making money. Because I think after doing this for a few years, I feel like everything that I draw has to benefit me like monetarily, and I don't really like thinking that way, because luckily right now I'm not necessarily burnt out with drawing, and I love drawing. Sometimes like you have to find ways to do things for yourself, and I like that you're doing that, because it's fun, and it's like it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with money, but it's so fun, and you get to involve your friends with it.
You're also participating in this. It's like the vendor friend book. It's such a fun and collaborative thing to do with other artist friends, and not even other artists. Even like sometimes if I get customers and I'll be like, oh, like sometimes they give like gifts of stickers and stuff. I'm like, oh, put that in my artist friend book. I was talking to like the one who introduced me to do it was Kelvin Thinknew, and he was like, here's what I've been doing. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. Like, I want to do this too. So then, like, I showed other people this, and I was like, here, sign my book. And then Jian started, and then, like, it's really fun seeing everyone's old book and, like, going through it. I was telling Kelvin about it later after you posted about it. I was like, look how far it's come. Like, isn't it great? And he's like, yeah, we're like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. One's, like, the brains, and one's the charismatic person just showing it to other people. And I'm like, this is great. I like working with other artists and doing things together because, like, it does build a community a bit more and a bit stronger. I did one of the shows, what was it? I did one of the Sugoi Saturdays with schwa and stuff like that. I don't particularly like outdoor events because like bringing a tent, a table, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like I don't have that things, and luckily a friend lent me all that equipment. But I do think like the community that schwa has built with like other artists, like helping them out, like it's a non-profit, so they do it for the people. And I'm like, I will make the effort to be a part of that for sure. Like any way I could help in that, I think it's great.
That's also, again, it's also a good way to make friends that way. Even though, yeah, like stamp rallies are obviously, well, most of them tend to be with the goal of like making money. But I feel like some of the friends that I made was because they were in a stamp rally that I was also in. And then eventually, like, you meet in person and then all of that. Honestly, like, as someone who wanted to branch out with Proxies, I feel like I've learned so much from this. So thank you. And this is also, like, I feel like on top of everything that we've talked about, like, in person. So where can our audience find you?
I'm on Instagram as Moonpooart. I'm always there, super active on it. I do try to be active on TikTok. I'm more interested whenever there's like a sexy audio. I'll be like, ooh, I can make hot men art to this. But yeah, you can find me on TikTok and Instagram. TikTok is moonpoo_.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Shamima, for joining us. I'm glad this was able to happen.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Like, time flew by so fast.
So thank you to everyone who also decided to listen in. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.